Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 16 of Maker's Mic, a music makers podcast presented by LR Bags. Our guest this episode is Gordon Kennedy, the son of legendary producer, songwriter, and guitar player Jerry Kennedy. Gordon has carved out his own distinguished career in the music biz. From the time he got his first Mel Bay instructional book, to working alongside Peter Frampton, Garth Brooks, and Ricky Skaggs, to winning the Grammy Award for Song of the Year, for co-writing the Eric Clapton hit Change the World. Gordon has most certainly made his mark on music history. Make sure to stick around after the interview to hear Gordon play a little tune for us. So you're from Shreveport?
Yeah, I was
originally born there.
That's right.
But you moved to Nashville.
I moved to Nashville
early.
when I was a year old with Mom and Dad. Dad putting his toe in the water to see if the music industry of Nashville was just sort of blossoming at that point, just starting to happen. And Shelby Singleton, who was also from Shreveport, and he was a producer. He ended up running the Sun label in recent years.
Right.
When it moved to Nashville. He talked Dad into, giving it a shot. And my mom and Dad and me, as a one-year-old, moved here in '61. And they, according to my dad, gave it all of 2 weeks before deciding, let's move back. They were homesick and things aren't happening fast enough. 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then Shelby came back in and said he had just come back from Chicago and where Mercury Records' home office, saying they were going to open a Nashville label for Mercury Records, and he was going to run it and wanted my dad to be his number 2 guy. And then eventually my dad would run Mercury Records for 21 years.
Oh, wow.
So that's what caused us to be able to stay in Nashville.
Yeah. When they left, did they still have family in Shreveport?
Oh, yeah. And we would go there, a couple times a year for holidays and different things. Grandmothers and aunts and cousins, uncles, and still a lot of family down there now. Yeah.
And you have 2 brothers?
Two brothers,
right?
Brian and Shelby. Yeah.
Are you
I'm
the oldest?
Oldest,
okay.
then Brian and Shelby.
So they were both born in Nashville?
Brian was born in Shreveport.
Okay.
For some reason or another, Dad and Mom decided to go back so he could be born in Shreveport.
Okay.
And he was.
Yeah.
And then by the time the third boy came along, it was like, okay, where's St. Thomas,
Yeah.
Yeah.
What? So both of your parents were musically inclined, and
in fact, that's how they met.
Okay.
Dad was, he was an artist by the time he was 11 or 12 years old on RCA Victor.
That's crazy.
He did a record. Chet Atkins played guitar on the first session that my dad did on this recording. And at some point became a regular on the Louisiana Hayride as a guitar player and performer. And somebody at some point said, you need to do a duet with this Linda Brannon. So the two of them got together and they performed the song, Who Wears Shorts?
Yeah.
And went over well, and somebody said, y'all got to do that again. At some point, Dad said, he asked her out, want to go to the movies. And so they got married at 17.
Wow.
And they had me at 19.
Yeah.
And, so Mom sang. She's probably more the R&B influence, growing up for me, while Dad liked, 50s rock and roll and the country stuff he was doing. We'd get in his car and it would be Ray Charles doing the country and western hits and maybe Little Richard, Fats Domino as we were traveling on vacations. But we get in Mom's car and it was always Otis Redding, Aretha Franklin, Junior Walker and the All-Stars, and Sam and Dave.
So you had a very diverse...
Yeah, and a jukebox in the basement of our home.
That's cool.
I tell people my first record player was actually a Seaberg 100 that played 45s. So we had that on the wall, and then a upright piano on this wall, and then a bunch of my dad's guitars and amps would always be where he would set him down coming in from the garage parking. And so I was always kind of surrounded by it, wanting to be immersed in it however I could. The first song I ever learned how to play was Stand By Me, but I learned it on piano when I was 7.
Okay.
But then there were the guitars sitting there, and at some point I would go, I think I'm supposed to be playing these. There are more of those, and and plus my dad can show me something if I have a question or whatever. So I ended up switching. At some point I tried drums, but wound up with the guitar.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about growing up in Nashville and like going to school and just what the city was like, because I know it's changed.
Well, my first childhood memories were living in Goodlettsville, north of Nashville. Uh-huh. And up until third grade, the middle of third grade year, we lived there, and we lived on a cul-de-sac, and it seemed like every house had one or two boys living in it, 3 in mine.
Yeah.
And we were a bicycle gang. We were kill the man with the football, playing army in the woods behind this guy's house. It was a great place to grow up, and we really missed that once we moved. Like I said, the middle of my third grade year, we moved out to Hillsborough Road in Nashville, and not a kid in sight, and a busy road in front that we couldn't go out and get on to do anything, ride our bikes or whatever. So but in retrospect, that may be the very thing that caused me to isolate myself more with the records that I was spinning and the guitar I was trying to
be able to practice more.
Yeah. And, and really, come to think of it, when we went back for summer vacation after my third grade year, this was a thing that kind of ended up lighting a fire under me as far as the guitar goes. The kid across the street, and this guy named Scott Culberson. But we went back to see all our buddies, in the summer after that year. We'd been gone for a half a year at that point. And at the point we went back, Scott's taking guitar lessons. And I remember scratching my head going, I'm supposed to be playing the guitar, not Scott.
Yeah.
My dad's a guitar player. So I went back kind of frustrated. And I think that was a thing that, and my grandmother told me when I grew up, she reminded me that I came back a little bummed out and frustrated, and to the point where they asked me, what's wrong? Scott's daddy's getting him guitar lessons, and, well, why don't you ask your dad to teach you how to play the guitar? He's a guitar picker. And I said, he won't teach me. He wants to be the best dang guitar picker in the world.
Yeah.
So that was my third grade, summer after third grade, the way my mind, I was going to say worked, but didn't work. And, but that was a thing that probably lit a little bit of a fire under me. And then I had a cousin in Shreveport named Randy Arthur, who was, on a trip to Shreveport, one of those vacations. And he's in his bedroom with a 55 Stratocaster, and a 54 Gold Top, and Jimi Hendrix records. And so I'm like, what in the world is going on? So that was another thing. And he sent me back to when we left with a Fun with Mel Bay instruction book, which that was the extent of my instruction, was the first few pages, major and minor chord first inversion, Fun with Mel Bay, and that was it.
Right.
That was the last time I, had any kind of lesson or instruction or whatever. So, but I mean, those kind of things, I can point to or that, caused me to sort of sit back up and reassess, what am I doing? Am I playing football? Am I playing basketball? Or how can I mix music with that in high school? I wanted to play sports, and I did, but I was always, at the same time, parallel, trying to get better and, work on this craft over on the side. Yeah,
I was going to ask you about, you were quite the athlete in high school and into college, yeah?
Well, once I got to college, I had flipped the switch completely to music, other than intramural sports,
Right.
But
realized, that must have, through high school, that must have kept you really busy playing music.
Yeah, especially the school I went to, Brentwood Academy, was for a little bitty tiny single A size school. By the time I left there, it was one of the most powerful, football teams in the state.
Yeah.
And so, for me, for 6 straight years, because I went 7th through 12th grade, it was football, basketball, track.
Wow.
Football, basketball, track. So 6 straight years.
And then throw music in there too.
Yeah. And
you just must have spent all your time practicing something.
Well, when I was a sophomore in high school, there's a kid that moved in, came down from Indiana, and I'm not sure where he went to school before I saw him, but Dan Huff. And that was another thing that happened in high school for me that's like, I can't imagine what would have happened if he hadn't come there, because he is a world-class guitar player, and he was all about the guitar. And come over and listen to this record, Larry Carlton and the Crusaders, Al Di Meola, all these different records he was introducing me to, because I was kind of just growing up on classic rock and the stuff that my dad was bringing home, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
But I mean, I hadn't heard anything that was all about the guitar.
Guitar-based.
Even the Beatles were about the song. Yeah. The guitar sort of...
There were so many other parts to...
Yeah, and so, but then here's a record where somebody, now I'm getting into Jeff Beck, Blow by Blow. All these different records are
Yeah.
starting to show up that are just making me think more about what can be done with the guitar and what I'm not doing with the guitar, and just so these things, and having Dan Huff as a somebody to inspire and to push me
Yeah.
to try to keep up with him. If nothing else, just the fact trying to keep up with him caused me to have to better myself in high school.
Yeah. Did you have like high school band or did talent
Our
shows?
school was so small that there
Uh-huh.
was no band, not even a pep band. We didn't have it, but we had a good rhythm section.
Yeah.
Dan and myself and Dan's brother David, who was a drummer. And then we had a guy that had graduated from BA handful of years before me, that came back and would play bass. So we had our little rhythm section, and the school would utilize this rhythm section to play like a 50s show. And then my senior year, we did a 70s show, and I tell people that now we did a 70s show because it was the 70s. Not, we weren't doing anything nostalgic. We were graduating in the 70s. I
Yeah.
graduated in 78. And so that little core rhythm section would sit in the orchestra pit and play everything from Eastbound and Down to Bob Seger to,
Cool.
whatever was, everybody wanted to, these people are going to get up and sing this song. But the first one we did was a 50s rock and roll show my junior year. But then we also would perform as our own group.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was
Yeah, we
wondering.
would do the assemblies at school.
Mhm.
We played, like after a football game one night, we would play a dance, those
Yeah.
kinds of things. So yeah, we were always asking what, let us play. What can we do? We were wanting to do that. And that school was great about not only letting us have the stage to perform, but even letting Dan and I would sit out in the hallway during study halls or what they called activity period,
Yeah.
whatever, and sit and practice.
And practice?
Yeah, and
Oh, that's
they'd
cool.
let us do it. By the time my son moved out of the 8th grade at this same school, and I'm sitting on stage in the theater there performing, I realized that in whatever it was at the time, 30 years or something, I had moved about 15 feet from the hallway right there to the
Yeah.
center of this stage. I'm still going back and doing things for the school and going to honor the headmaster who, the school will be 50 years old this year.
Wow.
And so sometime early next year, they're going to do a thing to, celebrate that. And I'm being asked to go back and perform.
Play. Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
So it's I've never really left that place in some ways.
Yeah.
And then it's worth mentioning also that I would wind up many years later, after leaving high school, within a handful of years, I would go to substitute for Dan Huff in a group called Whiteheart.
Uh-huh.
He wanted to go do some sessions in LA, and this is the summer of '84. And would I go sub for him? So I said, sure, do 3 shows. Well, I quit that band 6 years later.
Yeah.
He never came back.
Yeah.
So they asked me to stay. That's how I met my wife. That's how I met Tommy Sims, and we would write a song together at some
Crazy.
point. And all these things, just from
Was
hey,
this was after you had graduated from Belmont?
and I didn't graduate from Belmont.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually went there for 3 years
Okay.
and then went to work. So I did that group for a while, but then even years beyond that, Dan would send his production assistant around asking me, can you come play some sessions for Dan? So I've worked on Shadazy Records,
Mm-hmm.
Billy Ray Cyrus, Faith Hill, and a bunch of records that Dan produced. Jewel,
Yeah.
Leanne Rimes. He was, and the first few times that his production assistant would call me, I kept thinking he must want to borrow a guitar. He can't possibly want me to come and play
Come play
because
something.
why would I need to go do that? But he was like, oh, I just think it would be fun, and I just want you to do what you do. And so for most of those sessions, Carolyn Dawn Johnson was another one. He wouldn't play,
Yeah.
so there was a couple where he would come out and play, which was to me like going back in time, and it was great. But I mean, so I worked for him many years after we graduated high school too, and we still, hang out
Yeah.
and visit these days.
You did a lot of touring right after
With Whiteheart.
With Whiteheart.
Yeah, that was, we would do, 80 or 100 shows a year or something like that.
So you must have been what, 20?
Mid-20s.
Yeah.
I'm in my mid-20s
Uh-huh.
riding that gospel bus,
Yeah. And
And-
then you do the traveling and the touring and all that, and then you kind of decide to just slow it down a little bit and try your hand at session work. And
Right.
I guess what I'm getting, the question I'm getting to is, did you feel like that the touring life was maybe not something that you wanted to do.
It was always, and a lot of people who think it would be great to be in music and go and do all this stuff. And I'll describe it to you the way John Regan, who played bass for Frampton for 3 decades and was out, I toured with him when I was playing for Peter, said it one day. He said, "Oh, the 2.5 hours we play on stage every night, I do that for free, dude. I wouldn't charge anything for that. They pay me for every other second of the day," And so there is something to be said about that,
Yeah.
It occurs to me recently that I flew to L.A. to do a Ed Asner benefit show with Frampton, and just the man hours, the miles, the amount of gear, the amount of people that have to be there just for us to play this segment. Same thing with Garth and the iHeartRadio thing a month ago or so.
Right.
The amount of time and energy, blood, sweat, and tears that goes into going to do this 3 minutes, 4 minute segment, or whatever it is. It's crazy, and then like that's over it's a blur. Blink, it's done, and then it's back to waiting, stand by to wait, stand by to stand by, get up to this time to be in the lobby, to get on the shuttle, to go to the, to the airport. And so there's all that kind of stuff is what gets to me, But I had also gotten married 4 years into being in Whitehart, so I was sort of wanting to peel away from that, start a family, and so at the point where we were, thinking about having a family, I thought, I'm going to stay home, do more session work, and so that's what flipped that.
Okay, that's kind of what I was wondering, if that was just, so it just, all the timing kind of worked out.
And then 5 years went by, the same label that I had enjoyed being in the group Whitehart on the label Sparrow Records, they asked me and Jimmy Lee Slose if we would do a record for them. Don't have to tour, just do the record. So we did this thing called Dogs of Peace. And it was something that once I started doing it, I could not help pour myself into it,
Yeah.
It might have started as I'll answer the bell for my friends at Sparrow, but then it was one of those things where once I got into it, I got into it.
Yeah.
And that was happening parallel to this other thing I had tried with Wayne Kirkpatrick. We were trying to get a pop record deal in the early 90s and were being entertained by a label in New York for the better part of a year and beyond, only to find out that it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
We had turned in the songs. We had, been asked to write a pop hit. We can get you an alternative hit with this. This is in the early 90s, right? So alternative was the thing.
Oh, yeah.
But give me a pop hit, we can do another zero behind the numbers was how the label had said it to us. And so we wrote Change the World. Yeah. And turned that in thinking, this is what they've been asking for a year. And they passed saying, we don't hear the hit. So they let us go. Well, then the Dogs of Peace thing presented itself to me.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, well, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, only to watch the CCM industry kind of politely show us the door because rap was coming in. It was the next new thing.
Yeah.
DC Talk. Our stuff in CCM magazine was reviewed and said it sounded too much like the Beatles, the Eagles, James Gang, Pink Floyd, all these other horrible groups.
Yeah.
And so
wait a minute. Musically, is that such a bad thing?
So we weren't going to do anything beyond just making the record. And I remember thinking, gosh, I poured my heart into this, want to share this message again. Well, I would get to share that message again from the stage at the Grammys in February of 97 with the Clapton song.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of those things where I look back and go, how many months or years would I have had to have ridden the bus with Dogs of Peace or Whitehart or whatever it was I believed and poured my heart into doing in those days to have been able to share that one little message I was able to share on stage at the Grammys to an audience of 1.5 billion around the world.
Right.
So that kind of was a little wake-up thing for me. It enabled me to trust things that were happening to me, even if I didn't think that was the right thing or wasn't what I was pulling for, or praying for, or whatever. It showed me that sometimes there's another plan other than what you have in mind that's way better.
Yeah.
So Clapton doing our song, and then we go to the Grammys.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Change the World, just the whole, I'd like to hear the whole story of that, just
it came
from writing it to, and then there was, it was on the shelf for a while, and then how it got into Clapton's hands. And
I'll try to speed through it.
Sure.
Wayne Kirkpatrick, we go to the studio, 1991. We put together this little core of musicians with Tommy Sims and Chris McHugh.
Mm-hmm.
And Tommy, Chris, and myself were half of that Whiteheart lineup that when we left Whiteheart to do session work. So we were all in the studio working on these alternative sides, trying to get a record deal. I think the name of our group was going to be the Mute Brutes of Labor. And so on the first session, we got 4 songs that we're recording during some downtime.
Yeah.
Tommy says, "Say, fellas, is this something this group could make something out of?" And he starts riffing on the Change the World chord changes and had a title, Change the World, which probably looking back on it, because he hadn't developed anything lyrically beyond the title, he might have been thinking it was something more along the lines of social consciousness kind of song or something like, I always think Hands Across the Studio, We Are the World or something.
Right, yeah.
And so he showed it to us, and I remember thinking in my head, well, gosh, that sounds enough like Paul McCartney that I like it.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking Wayne's probably sitting there going, well, that sounds enough like Fogelberg or that I like it. And Tommy's probably thinking, I hope this doesn't sound too much like Stevie Wonder for these guys to like it. But that's what's great about that song, is that it feels like they're all this melting pot of influences and timeless styles and things that have blended into that song. And so we ended up writing it separate from each other over the course of 1 year. So a year later, the same month, Tommy and I demoed the song up in Columbus, Ohio, where he's up there making a church choir record in some guy's basement.
Mm-hmm.
So I traveled up there to just do the demo for this song. And then we turned that into the label that had been flirting with us for a year, and that's when they finally gave us an answer. They'd only been giving us give us 90 more days to decide, 60 more days, 90 more days. Well, they finally made a decision after hearing Change the World, and that was that they were going to pass. They didn't hear the hit. This was in 1992. So I'm sort of treading water for another year. No publishing deal, whatever.
Right.
A little bit of session work here and there, staying afloat. And my friend Doug Howard, who had been in the tape copy room at Polygram Music, where I had written from 84 to 90, he had left a couple of years before I did to go get a law degree in D.C. Mm-hmm. He graduated from Belmont, master's from Vanderbilt, and now he's going to pursue. This is the guy in the tape copy room at Polygram Music. Right. He is now the dean of the Curb School of Music, Business, and Entertainment at Belmont from the tape copy room.
Good for him.
So, but he's off in D.C., and it's fall of 92. I get a call from him. What are you doing right now? Nothing. You writing for anybody? No. Well, listen, I'm coming back to Polygram to run the Nashville office. So he went from the tape copy room to being asked by the guy who ran the company worldwide, Australian guy, will you come back and run the Nashville office? So he's coming back. He said, I want you back over there because I like what you do. The first song I turned into him was Change the World.
Cool.
So we had thought, and I asked, can you get this to Clapton? Because he had just done Tears in Heaven.
Yeah.
That's not how it happened, though. It ended up getting placed in Wynonna's next pile for her next songs, for her next album, which was is it called Revelations? I think that's it.
Okay.
Freebirds on that album. I said, no, that's one of the other songs on there. And I remember Dan Huff calling me from the session. We're recording your song right now. And they're saying it's going to be a single. And then we're told later that they're saying it's going to be a single. And this is in 92. Well, things happen in her personal life. I think she's going to have a baby and all these things are happening. The record doesn't come out for 2.5 years. Then we watch them put out one single that's not ours. Then the second one, well, we must be the third. No. They put out 3 singles, and then I run into Tony Brown, the producer out here on Music Row. The record's label is saying they're not going to single that song, that the radio will never play that song. So, now we failed with the group turning that song in thinking this is what they've been asking for, and the guy passes from New York, the label. Now Wynonna's going to single the song, and it doesn't happen. So it's like whiff, walking away each time going, we failed. But what you do is you just go back to work. Now, so at some point in all this going backwards, there's a woman who's a music supervisor on a lot of Jerry Bruckheimer films, a lot of Touchstone Pictures, named Kathy Nelson. She comes to visit Tony Brown's office in Nashville. He says, listen to this song I am going to record on Wynonna, and plays her our demo. She remembers it out in Hollywood. Some time goes by, months, year, I don't know how long. She's casting music for the film Phenomenon. What's that song I heard in Tony Brown's office? Places, gets it, sends it to Robbie Robertson, who's doing the exec production for the soundtrack album for the film. Yeah. He's the one that calls Clapton and Babyface. He says to Eric Clapton, he sends him the song, and I've seen a video where Clapton says, sure, I heard the composition, said, sure, I'd love to do it, And then I remember that Babyface got a call, about would you do
when I get in on this?
Would you produce a song on Eric Clapton for our soundtrack? Yes. Would you produce a song you didn't write? 10 seconds of silence. And then he says, yes. And so he produced this killer record, Yeah. So I remember being in the studio with Tommy in the summer of 1996, and we demoed the thing 4 years prior. Yeah. And all this water under the bridge. And he says, GK, by the way, we're getting another cut on Change the World. I said, really? Who? He said, Eric Clapton. Well, my jaw hit the floor. Yeah. Because, 3 years prior or whatever, I was asking Doug Howard if we can get this to Eric Clapton. So it took me a long time to put together and hear the story of how it happened. And I just told you how it happened. So the next thing I know, this song is, 14 weeks at number one and 81 consecutive weeks in the top 20 Billboard AC charts, a record 81 weeks. And Casey Kasem, every Sunday, the countdown, bam, number one again this week, changed the world, So then we go to the Grammys, and it won him Best Pop Male Vocal Performance, and then they got Record of the Year too. And in the middle of that night, they sandwiched the Song of the Year, and we got that. And so that's one of those things where, Doug will say to me as a publisher, he said, that is an evergreen. That's an evergreen, and it'll outlive us. Yeah. That's how it happened. Yeah. So, and then somebody says, you need to do that again. Well, yeah, we do, but we can't, Yeah. There's not, we didn't do that.
Right. Yeah. We first met through Peter Frampton.
Doing that video.
Yep, doing the video session. Tell me about working with him. And
can you believe, and he and I can't believe it's been 20 years. That I knocked on his door because my brother Shelby and a publisher named Bobby Reimer, who had Peter as a writer with Almo Irving back then, those two guys need to get together. Of course, the way that happens back then is they go to Peter Frampton and they say, there's this guy named Gordon Kennedy, his father, and they might tell him the family history. He wrote this Change the World song, blah, 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 and da, 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 and going on and on. Would you want to write with him? So they twist his arm a little bit. And then they come to me and say, you want to work with Peter Frampton? Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I tell Peter, I say, he's got twist marks on his arm. I got pinch marks on mine. Is this really happening? Yeah. But it's just been such a wonderful friendship first, and then the music thing has been so natural between us. For some reason or another, I've been very blessed to be a person that is like a go-to person for him when it comes time to write a song, do a two-man performance, one-off for this. And I've toured the big show with him 2 different years and done some one-offs with the band when he'll have me come on and do things. Again, another benefit show out in California, like a little over a year ago out in La Jolla. But and so just in the last, few weeks, I've been down to his studio. He's working on 3 albums at the same time right now. He's sort of cramming for finals and just playing his tail off. It's phenomenal what he's doing. He can tell and tells me that this IBM thing that he's got, the degenerative muscular thing, is affecting him. I can't tell listening to him.
Really?
No, and you wouldn't be able to tell.
Yeah.
he can tell. So he sees some finish line down the road and doesn't know how far he is away from it, but it's there somewhere.
Yeah.
It's what he's thinking. And so he's getting, while the sun is shining,
Yeah. Just trying to
and
knock
just
out a bunch
phenomenal.
of stuff.
So he's had me come down and participate on a couple things, and we're going to continue to write.
Yeah. When we did that video session, he had just released the acoustic.
Raw.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you tour with him, Fred?
He and I did the 2-man acoustic show. He called Peter Frampton Acoustic Raw Tour, or Peter Frampton Raw, I think was the name of the tour. And it was just me and him, his son and a partner of Julian's named Ben would open every show. And then Peter and I would do about an average of about 2 hour, 20 minutes on acoustic guitars. Peter telling stories.
Yeah. Maybe
holding a guitar up and explaining why this guitar is significant. Of course, he's got the guitar that he wrote, Baby, I Love Your Way, and Show Me the Way. And the same day, he wrote it on this guitar.
Was that the Godin?
It was a Epiphone Texan.
Epiphone, right? Yeah.
That survived the Nashville flood.
Yeah.
It was underwater. And he thinks it sounds better now. I can't argue with it because it sounds phenomenal.
Yeah.
I don't know as much about what it sounded like before. But he says it sounds better, and I'm thinking, I don't doubt it, listening to it,
Yeah.
But I mean, so those shows were, the audience were people, that had heard him for decades, but they've never heard him tell these stories.
And he's such a good storyteller.
Yeah, and it was, so they were treated to some real intimate, special evening, and I would sit next to him.
How great for you to just be there.
I had the best seat in the house.
Yeah.
And never ever got tired of hearing him tell the story about George Harrison, the story about being in the Cub Scouts or whatever it was.
Right.
It was this was just so special, and to get to be not a fly on the wall, but holding a guitar next to him, which can be both intimidating and exhilarating. It's one of those things where, and Garth would describe it as a blessing and a curse. Yeah. When somebody like Peter Frampton says, "You want to come play a guitar alongside me for this?" Yes, and then you hang up the phone going, "Oh gosh, what am I doing?"
Right.
Okay, so
but
it's been just one of the most wonderful collaborations, and that I get to be a part of that because I was such a huge fan.
Yeah,
I mean, I had to be drafted from his legions of fans to participate in the music with him at some point, and that's hard. That's hard to do. I can tell you this is the truth. Doing just an acoustic thing with him in Germany on a radio station. It was the one show out of about a half a dozen where they were pre-recording it. Thankfully, because I stopped playing to listen to him. And I'm supposed to keep playing this rhythm part, but I stopped. And then all of a sudden I went, "Oh my gosh,
I gotta play."
I gotta play. So that has actually happened to me.
Though, I mean, sitting next to...
Yeah, and there were some nights when it's the electric guitar and I'm standing over there with the electric guitar, the same thing every night. I would just kind of cut my eyes over and just freeze. Like, you got to be kidding me, But what a gifted, ferocious musician he is. And I think that is the one thing I've enjoyed seeing people realize in recent years is what a musician he is, because, he had this iconic image and the success and and it almost became something he had to overcome.
Yeah, sure.
To recover from his success. But he's always wanted to be the guitar player. And I think he and Jeff Beck are in this echelon together that can't be touched when it comes to that kind of guitar stuff.
Yeah. You've done session work with so many people. Little Big Town and Faith Hill, She Daisy, Billy Ray Cyrus, Wynonna.
See, Wynonna's another one of those souls that I've always just loved her. And when the first time I ever did anything for her was go sing the background vocals on Change the World. And, she was leaving the studio out in Franklin at Bennett House in a car with the tinted windows. And I was walking by. I didn't know she was in the car, but the window came down and there was Wynonna sitting in the back seat. And she said, "Sing pretty for me, baby," and rolled the window back up. I went, "Hey, that was Wynonna." Yeah. But then we would actually collaborate on a song for a movie of her sisters. At some point, she and I and Wayne and I produced this thing on her Always just loved spending time with her. I played on Reba McEntire's first #1 record.
Yeah.
I got lucky to be a part of. That was back when she would come in and hand out T-shirts to the players. She had brought from the road, and probably was still had some of the dirt on her from riding the rodeos. And
Right.
I mean, she was just a kid at that point, as was I, Belmont College.
Yeah.
In fact, that's one of the reasons why I left Belmont. Is I was booked to play on a Reba McEntire session for Mercury, and there was the guy who had come out at my third year at Belmont, had taken over running the music business school, who decided this thing called seminar would be mandatory.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so I made the first one, and they took roll. And said, oh, they're serious, Get an F on your transcript if you miss a seminar, no questions, So, but the second one happened to fall on when I was booked to play this Reba date. I went to the office. Can I get an excused absence? How do you expect to make it in the music business if you don't attend these functions that we put on for you? And I just think I had smoke coming out of my ears or something, because I went back to class. I couldn't even hear what they were saying.
Yeah.
And I think I folded my book up and walked out.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I'll go to work. And, I think Jerry Reed at the time was saying, son, you get out of school, I'll put you to work. I thought, well, I'll go to work for Jerry Reed. Well, There was no job for working for Jerry Reed. I mean, he was saying that, but I think I went and had lunch with him, and I said, well, I'm out of school, ready to go to work. Son, have you ever thought about joining the Army? Well, no. Well, that'd be the best thing for you. Are you kidding me?
Okay, guitar.
So it took me a couple of years to sort of get my feet under me at that point. I played in a group around Nashville with Larry Stewart, who was the lead singer of Restless Heart.
Okay, yeah.
Before they went and signed a 7-album deal with RCA Records, we had a little group that played local clubs, and we're trying to get our foot in the door and write these songs and do this. But those guys split off. He and David Ennis, the keyboard player, split off. And then I was within weeks, got asked to do 3 shows for Dan for Whiteheart. And so that's how those things separated.
Wow.
And now I produced Larry Stewart's most recent album.
Uh-huh.
So all those years later, our paths converge again. And it's this great record that Larry's done. I was just thrilled to be able to do something with him again.
Yeah. Do you do a lot of producing or engineering?
I'm sort of by accident sometimes get drafted into doing the production role, like with Ricky Skaggs. I wrote and co-wrote all the songs for this record called Mosaic.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about...
At the point where he heard the first 3 songs, which I had just put on this CD on a lark, because I thought it was going to be, he's looking for bluegrass songs. He and Hornsby had recorded a song that I wrote with Phil Madeira for this duet record, and then a couple of years or so go by, he's looking for songs again. So I'm thinking another bluegrass record, and so but I thought I'm just going to put these 3 songs on there so he could just sort of hear my heart. And just put them on there, and I thought, and then he'll call me and say, "Hey, those are fine, but here's what I'm wanting."
Yeah, I'm looking to do this.
But he called me and said, "I want to do these first 3 songs."
Wow.
I said, "How are you going to do those bluegrass?" I'm not. I'm going to do them just like your demos, and I'm going to need you to come produce the record with me. So that's how I become producer on something. Is that so? Back into it, and so I've produced, just a handful of things that are, worth mentioning over the years, but I don't sort of hang that shingle out and try to be the producer.
Yeah.
I don't try to.
How was it? Tell me a little more about working with Ricky.
Oh,
I've been up to a studio up in Hendersonville.
Yeah, that's it. On Rockland. Well, when my dad was producing Reba's earliest records, he said, I've got this guy named Ricky Skaggs coming in to do a duet with her on a song called Small 2-Bedroom Starter.
Okay.
And he's going to sing the harmony, and it's almost like a duet. So I had heard the Skaggs and Rice record.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be in the studio when this guy showed up to sing, because I was already loving what he was doing. And then I remember as he was leaving, Dad saying, get a good look at him, because he won't be available to do this much longer. And sure enough, it was within no time at all. He was just re-establishing real and the best country music. His live show at that time is one of the best I've ever seen in my life, and to this day. Yeah. So I was always a fan, and when I became more established as a songwriter, it was always in the back of my mind. that's a dream of mine. It's a goal to write a song for Ricky Skaggs. I would just think that I have accomplished everything I want to do at that point. So we wound up getting a song on the Hornsby Skaggs record, and then I had to go play on it. I thought he wanted to borrow my dad's dobro.
Yeah.
The one my dad used on Harper Valley PTA and all these other records.
Yeah.
So I went and got it out of the Hall of Fame and took it down there and handed it to him. He goes, "No, I want you to play it." Because I'd played it on the demo, the solo, and I went, "Oh, no, man, that's not necessary at all." I said, "I'll caddy for you. I brought it down here to hand it to you." He goes, "No, I want you to play it." So I ended up playing it, which freaked me out, sitting watching him on the other side of the glass from me, and I'm playing, he's watching. And then a couple years after that's when the Mosaic thing sort of happened. And that is the most powerful project I've ever been a part of in my entire life. And I don't know how anything in this life will ever equal the experience of making that record with him. Just what we saw on a daily basis. Some days make you cry, some days make you laugh.
Yeah.
But we had grown fond of describing that record after a while as being a record that we started working on, and within about a week and a half to 2 weeks was a record that was working on us.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so, and that's another guy like Peter Frampton that it's another somebody I would call my brother, you know, that I get to make music with. And Peter has certainly been that also.
Yeah.
I love
Also,
these guys. Yeah.
Skaggs, like you were talking about with Peter being in this echelon of, I mean, Ricky.
Arguably the best.
And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he is, to me, the best that's ever been in bluegrass.
Yeah.
And again, in country, you know, that stuff that he did in the 80s, Country Boy and, you know, Highway 40 Blues and Uncle Pen, all that. It's just, how are you going to top that? You know, how are you going to top that? So, from time to time, I still get to go do things with him. And when he's in dire straits about, you know, I need somebody to help me go do this benefit show or whatever, he'll call me and I'll call him. So we wind up doing things together often just because of that. And we have the Mosaic 2, the sequel, or Morsaic, we jokingly call it. All the songs are sitting and ready to go. It's just the music business. Yeah. It's how do you justify making a record, spending the money to make a record when nobody buys records? So that's what you have to ask yourself, unfortunately, these days, you know. And Peter went through that with a song that we wrote called I Saved a Bird Today. And he thought, let's record this one song. We'll put it on iTunes. And then he started flirting with the idea of doing a video. And it went through his mind, how can I justify spending the money? And we had a conversation about, I said, you know, that painting you have in your home down in Nashville, it's gorgeous. I said, did you buy that thinking that it's going to be a money-making thing, or did you want to hang something on the wall that is beautiful for people to look at when they pass by? I said, you need to think of your video as being that these days, because that may be all it is. Right. And so that's what caused him to, let's do it, and did this great animated video for I Saved a Bird Today. But so, you have to sort of these days, when you're asking yourself about the to-do list in the music industry, you start off with question one, does it matter? And then what are the reasons, you know, what, if it matters, then on what level? And then sometimes if the answers to that are just so, you proceed. Yeah. It's like, I want to write a song for Bonnie Raitt just to hear her sing it. Yeah. You know, that's enough. That's enough for me. I'm not thinking, well, if I sent this to so-and-so instead, it might make 35 cents more. What, you know, it's like, no. Those questions are all off the table. It doesn't even matter anymore, but it's for a different, the criteria is different now. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Man, you've had, I mean, just an incredible, like, already a lifetime's worth of achievements and accomplishments. And lucky fellow. Yeah. Blessed. What, and I mean, some of the things you've touched on already might fall into this, but outside of, like, you know, having a family and the things that make life great like that, but musically, what would you say are some of your most memorable and cherished accomplishments? Well, I grew up in the really long shadow of a dad who played on Elvis, Dylan, Ringo, produced Jerry Lee Lewis, Roger Miller, Reba McEntire, the Statler brothers. For
Tough.
31 years, he
Yeah.
produced the Statler brothers.
Tough act to follow.
Oh, my gosh. And so there was a time when I thought, I just want to do what my dad does. And as I got older, that became, I just want to do, oh, wait a minute, do I really want to try to do what my dad does? You know, oh gosh, you know, and look at the discography and the things that my dad has accomplished. So it became daunting at some point. But again, it's, and I asked the students at Belmont this question recently. Are you doing this because you want to be rich? You want to be famous? Or is this a calling that's on your life? And for me, I realized years ago that this is, in fact, a calling that's on my life. And so because I've answered the call, I see over the years where I've been equipped to continue to answer the call.
Yeah.
Be it the way a guitar finds its way into my hands, or this door swings open and an artist is on the other side inviting me to come, hey, come produce this record with me, Ricky Skaggs or Peter Frampton, you know.
Yeah.
Come write with me and then come tour with me and then, you know, come produce with me. So because I answered the call that's on my life, you know, and I don't know if you've ever heard this phrase or not. I heard it years, but it's hit me harder these days. God doesn't call the equipped. God equips the called.
Right.
So when you answer the call, if it's truly your calling, then you'll see how, and then the other way you might know is because you keep getting called.
Yeah.
You know, you actually get physical calls to come do this and that. So getting to work with, at some point, I look over my shoulder and I see, well, good night. I've worked with Garth Brooks.
Yeah.
Peter Frampton.
Yeah.
Ricky Skaggs.
Yeah.
And then you just mentioned some of them a while ago, but I mean, Faith and Tim and Martina and Billy Ray and Shadazy and
Little Big Town.
Yeah, Little Big Town. And my gosh, Alison Krauss.
Oh.
You know, Nickel Creek.
Yeah.
I still recognize it as being, this is what my dad did. And my dad got into it in a very unusual way too. He was 9 years old when his father asked him if he wanted to get a guitar lesson. And his father, who I'm named after, was a deputy sheriff in Caddo Parish in Shreveport. And just, you know, hey, you know, maybe it's because he liked Gene Autry movies or Roy Rogers.
Right, yeah. But
would you like to get a guitar lesson?
It set everything in motion, huh?
Yeah. And I had known that my grandfather died when my dad was 9 years old and all these things. But at some point found out that the sequence of events were, would you like to get a guitar lesson? Yeah. Took him as a 9-year-old Jerry Kennedy on a Friday, dropped him off to see Tillman Franks to learn how to play a song called How Far Is Heaven? That was his first guitar lesson.
Yeah.
And the following Monday is when my grandfather died.
Oh, wow.
So my dad is now on the path he would be on for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
You know, because of, son, would you like to get a guitar lesson?
Yeah.
And then he's gone 3 days later, you know, after that first guitar lesson.
Yeah.
So that's how he got into music, you know, and I grew up, you know, and was baptized in it from the time I can remember, while most families were watching the TV, their favorite show together, Gilligan's Island or whatever it was. You know, mine was gathered around staring at 2 stereo speakers and a reel-to-reel tape machine spinning and listening to Roger Miller or Jerry Lee Lewis and those records.
Huh. Tell me about your plan for the next couple of years.
Well, Garth has sort of answered that for me. You know, just after Thanksgiving last year, Garth called. Hey, I'm going to go out and play stadiums for the next 3 years. I want you to go with me. So that's what I'm doing for the next 3 years that I can put on the calendar and know that I'm doing, which is what, it's also the very thing that causes me to be a little shaky about everything else on the calendar. Because now people say, hey, can you come play this event for Brightstone, or can you do this for St. Jude's? And now I have to say, I can say yes until I have to say no, or I can say yes if you don't mind in the 11th hour me getting a substitute, because if I see the Garth signal in the sky, I got to go, you know.
Yeah, right. I have a few kind of silly questions I like to ask at the end of all my interviews.
I hope so.
Do you have any jokes?
Any jokes?
Yeah.
Man, I mean,
you know, do you keep like,
well,
you have a go-to joke kind of?
I have one joke that I came up with.
Okay.
That I've heard Garth use, and I've heard my brother Brian use it since it actually happened on a radio show years ago.
All right.
I mean, like 30 years ago. It was a crazy long time ago, but the fact that my brother and these guys keep kind of reminding me that I said this. I was on the radio, and the DJ said to me, "So, do you believe in reincarnation?" And I said, "No, but I may have in another lifetime." So that was my joke. I thought, if I ever get to meet Stephen Wright, that's what I would tell him. Feel free to use this.
Yeah,
I'm such a fan of his humor.
I could hear him doing that.
He would come out and say, "I don't believe in reincarnation, but I may have in another lifetime."
Give me a couple of your deserted island albums.
Oh, that's a great question. Abbey Road. Looks Like Rain by Mickey Newberry. Oh. Every Picture Tells a Story, Rod Stewart. Hendrix in the West. It's a live album.
Okay.
Zeppelin 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mosaic. Right. I would have to have that album.
Yeah.
And then if I put it on first, I would never hear the rest of them. Let me see. That's a great question.
That's a really good list.
Yeah,
you spouted those off pretty quick too.
No,
a lot of people have to think about it for a long time.
Because I'm thinking of the ones that I had on vinyl when I was a kid that I bought on CD also.
Right. Yeah.
And still go to. I mean.
Yeah.
And I've repurchased entire catalogs by certain artists. Yes.
Yeah.
And Queen, vinyl, and then all the. But those. Deja Vu, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just carry on. Those would be some of the staples that I would think of immediately.
Yeah.
And my dad's on the Mickey Newberry record.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that was one they made in the summer of '69, and just it's hauntingly great. It's such a great album. Puts you in a mood.
Tell me a band that you listen to that might surprise people.
That I listen to now?
Yeah. Or that you've listened to in the past, I guess.
I mean, there are some things that come to mind that if somebody knew I listened to Rush, for example, they would say, "Where is the evidence that you've listened to Rush in anything that you've done?" Because it's so far and away from anything I could ever do.
Yeah.
That might be one that would surprise people. But I mean, currently I get a kind of a kick out of Greta Van Fleet.
Okay.
Because they're hearkening back to things that are familiar to me.
Yeah.
And I get a kick out of watching them perform live too. So, those are my first.
Okay. Yeah.
Impression.
Is there a movie or a TV show that you've been thinking about lately? It doesn't have to be the last thing you saw or just.
My favorite movie of all time is Elephant Man.
Oh, yeah.
I think 1980, David Lynch.
Right. Yeah.
Directed. But I had seen this movie called Magic with Anthony Hopkins. I saw it in the theater.
Okay.
And I thought, who is that guy? His acting just blew my mind. He plays a ventriloquist. Anne Margaret's in the film. Ed Lauter.
It's an older movie?
Yeah, it was like 79. It preceded Elephant Man, right? And the cast were Anthony Hopkins, Anne Margaret, Burgess Meredith, and this guy named Ed Lauter. That's really the principal players in this movie, and this ventriloquist doll. And I think his name is Fatch. And he cusses up a storm and everything. When Anthony Hopkins is the ventriloquist, well, he has to go away to a cabin somewhere to sort of kind of get a grip, because Fatch is real to him, and his manager, Burgess Meredith, is worried about him. So you need to go take some time off, kid, Anyway, that movie blew my mind so much, and this actor, Anthony Hopkins, that when I saw his name in the trailer for Elephant Man, I didn't care what the movie was about.
Yeah, you were going to see
I was going to go see, I want to go see that guy in that movie.
Yeah.
And then that became my favorite movie of all time.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Do you want to play a song for us?
Well, I can do just a little touch of, how about the short version of Change the World?
That sounds good. Let me get I'm going to...
You want to re-mic?
Yeah, I'm going to pause for a second.
Okay.
And get a microphone over there for you. All right. Whenever you're ready. Yeah, and I mean, if you want to introduce it? Or
Well, we talked about this.
Yeah.
This song a little earlier, "Change the World." This is the thing that Wayne Kirkpatrick, Tommy Sims, and myself will look back on and realize that we have lived a lot of our lives and sending this song the bill. I mean, it's just,
That's perfect.
Yeah. But I mean, my gosh, Eric Clapton having done one of your songs too, it's hard to beat.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'll do the short version.
Cool.
If I could reach the stars, pull one down for you, and I'd shine it on my heart so you could see the truth, that this love I have inside is everything it seems. But for now I find it's only in my dreams I can change the world. I would be the sunlight in your universe. You would think my love was really something good. Baby, if I could, I'd change the world. If I could be the king, even for one day, I'd take you as my queen, and I'd have it no way, and our love would rule in this kingdom we had made. Till then I'll be a fool, wishing for a day I can change the world. I would be the sunlight in your universe. You would think my love was really something good. Baby, if I could, I'd change the world. If I could, I would. If I could, I would change the world.
Yeah, man.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Gordon. I really appreciate your
I've
time.
enjoyed time
man.
with you anytime.
Yeah, awesome. All right, that was Gordon Kennedy with the short version of Change the World. I'd like to thank Gordon for sitting down with us today and sharing all his stories and playing a song for us. If you'd like to hear more of Gordon's guitar playing, go check out the LR Baggs handcrafted video session we did with Peter Frampton. All right, that wraps it up for this episode. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time on Maker's Mic.